Are you looking for more out of your life? Do you need ideas on how to start new businesses and how to move forward in your own personal life? Well, guess what? You have come to the right radio show. At You Can Overcome Anything podcast show, you will learn and hear from many people from all walks of life who are sharing their challenges, their stories, the habits, and the mind shifts they had to overcome to become who they are today. On top, you will get a chance to connect and see how you can overcome anything by networking and learning about your next move through this radio show. I present to you our great speakers at You Can Overcome Anything podcast show with your host, CesarRespino. Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. It is your host, CesarRespino, and today I have a special guest. Her name is Susan Mckenzie. Hey, Susan, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Cesar?
I'm doing great. Thank you for being here today. Before we get started, let me introduce you to our guest, our listeners. With a vast array of personal and professional experience, Susan passionately shares her life's wisdom with her clients, with experiences ranging from single motherhood, a child's addiction, and profound grief to an amazing marriage and living a full, rich life. Susan is able to support her clients on all levels. Using color therapy, Susan mentors clients as they travel along their personal journeys. Color has the capacity to bring your deepest confusions and doubts to the surface, providing answers that work. Peace, harmony, and balance are the desired goals. Wow, that's amazing. And you know what? I don't think I ever heard of a color therapy. I mean, obviously, I heard of all the different therapies, hypnotherapy, NLP, a lot of different, variations of that. Never have I heard of that, sound therapy, and all these different things. So definitely want to learn more about that. Before we dive into that, though, tell me a little bit about your background. What was your upbringing? Where are you originally from?
Yeah, so I am a first generation Canadian. Right now, I live in I live in Burlington, Ontario, Canada. My parents were immigrated to Canada from England and Ireland in 1955, and they came over here to make a better life for themselves. I was actually born and raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, which is right smack in the middle on the prairies. And, I would say it was a great place to grow up. I still have a very special place in my heart there. It's really cold, but it is what it is. In the winter, it's really, really cold there. So, my upbringing was, I came from a nuclear family. Everything. When I was 18, my parents, in 1979, so I gave my age away there. My parents divorced, and in 1979, that was a real challenging time for me, because the reality is, a lot of people were getting divorced. And, when I look at my own kids today, and, less parents are together than they are divorced. Right. So during that time, that was really, I think that was really difficult, even though I was 18 at the time. And then I've done a few things in my life. I've traveled. I lived in London, England. I lived in Montreal. I went back to university late, and it was there where I became pregnant and had my son. So I was a single mom for the first 5 years of his life. Left Quebec, moved to Ontario, and met my husband walking our dogs like 25 years ago. So, and we've subsequently have also had 2 children. So we have 3 children altogether. So yeah.
No, that's great. So let me ask you this: why? I guess 2 things. Why do you think there was a lot of people going through the divorce? And then the most important thing is, how do you cope with that? I mean, obviously, although you were already 18 and you understood, and you obviously things. I do believe that can be definitely impactful for anyone, that is part of that. Did that really create some sort of imprint or impact on your life, and knowing now that you have parents that are separated, and you got to go to 2 different places and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I think it did. I ended up staying at home in our house. So my mom actually moved out, which is, really,
Mm.
not mostly you see,
The other way, yeah,
the father moving out, but my mom moved out,
yeah.
and I understand why my mom moved out, and we wanted to because we wanted to stay in the house because
Hmm.
that's where I was. My sister was 2.5 years older than me, so my sister wasn't around as much. But I was, I was finishing up school, my grade 12
Yeah.
and whatnot, and so I stayed in the house. I think it had a huge impact on me, and but in a very positive way. I think at first
Mm.
not so much, but
Right.
there was a lot of embarrassment around that because in 1979 people were not divorcing. People just they just
Yeah.
stayed together and were miserable. I mean, that's the reality of it, right?
Right.
But I think it had an impact on my life in so much as I was very adamant that I would not get married unless I knew I was marrying the right person. And I
Hmm.
and I think we do know whether or not we do. And I have married the
Yeah.
right person, but I
Right.
didn't get married until I was like I didn't meet my husband until I was 36. I
Yeah.
didn't get married
Wow.
until I was like 37 going on 38. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it had an impact, but in the end, I think that was quite a positive thing for me.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that somehow it seems like you said before, back in the day, couples will stay together even if they were unhappy, right? I mean, they were just they'll probably die miserably together, whatever the case may be. And it seems like now I don't know if it's the right thing either, except it seems like now now people cannot be in relationships. Like seems like you're cycling people as you're cycling different things, and I don't understand the logic yet, because I've seen people that have gone from one marriage to another marriage to another marriage, and not necessarily that that's a bad thing. I do believe that if you had a bad meal doesn't mean that you're never gonna eat again. You have to
Right.
get to where you need to get to. Except is seen in a different perspective by society. The biggest thing I think more than how it's seen is what is the impact that is being left behind the family, right? If there's kids involved, if there's other family members that were very so close to that union, where it becomes more so an impactful event for those people, right? I think more than anything, that's how I see it now, more so than before. But I guess either way, there's always been some sort of impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think children are impacted. I've always said that we have to love our children more than we dislike each other in a relationship,
Mhm.
right? And that stands throughout the whole entire time in your relationship, because relationships have ups and downs over the years, right?
Right,
I'm not saying people shouldn't divorce. I mean, I don't think people should stay together just because of the kids, because
right.
I
I
think
agree with
that's
you.
also because the energy of that and knowing, like, I mean, but listen to my parents argue was really quite was really quite impactful on my life. It was like, oh geez, I don't want to listen to that. Like,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
so it has its positives and negatives. I think if I don't necessarily think that people should stay together if they're not happy,
Hmm.
but it has to really be amicable, right? And
Right.
people really need to keep that in mind when they're doing that. I think the children really have to be kept in mind when they're going through that experience, right?
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. So you stay with your dad. You were finishing school, so then you went to college. You kind of had an idea of what you wanted to do, or
Oh no.
right.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah, all I knew, so I stayed at home with my dad. My sister wasn't there. So I was like, 17, 18, 19. I worked full time. I managed to land a job right after I got out of school. And but I basically became the main, I could say caregiver, but I'm gonna say, well, I guess
Yeah,
caregiver of the home. And that
gotcha.
that is, that is the reality of it. I did the laundry, and I made some dinners, and I did the grocery shopping. Not that I paid for it, but my dad would pay for it. He would write
Right.
me a check, and
Yeah.
back in the day, write me a check, and then I would just fill it in. Yeah, see if that flies today, right?
Yeah. Right.
But
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. So it was a lot of that. But then so then for me, what happened was I went on vacation to England.
Mm.
And in the job that I did, I used to work very closely with the people in our law office in London. And I went to England, and I was there for like a week, and I went, oh man, I love it here. And I have patriality because my mother's English.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, I'm going to move there. And I did.
Yeah.
So I moved to England in January of 1982, and I had a job to go to, and I lived with my uncle, and then eventually bought my own flat, and just I lived there for 7 years, and it was a
Wow.
really big part of my life, and it was easy for me to slide into it because the English culture was very much a part of my upbringing, right? So that was kind of easy in some ways and difficult in others, but yeah, it was a really good time in my life, but it was time to come home when I did, and I did that
Yeah.
like 7.5 years
Well,
later.
I think that's actually pretty awesome. One, you obviously had the ability to reconnect with some family members, right? I would assume. And then the
Yes.
second thing is, sometimes I do believe that we have to be able to take some sort of risk in life, to be able to experience life to the fullest, right? And so, even though you came back, you fulfill that purpose, you fulfill something in your life to help you see things from a different perspective too. And I do believe that if people have the opportunity, in my opinion, if people have the opportunity to either travel more and or live in a different place, it's definitely going to help you, in your own life, see things different from a different perspective. Maybe even figure out what you want to be able to do in your own personal life. So with that said, obviously you said, I love it, I want to move there, I kind of have family there. What were some lessons? Maybe there were some lessons during those 7 years that looking back now, you said, wow, that particular thing might have helped me, or were there no lessons for you to take away from that experience?
I think that because I was in my 20s, I did a lot of drinking because I was in England.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
don't want to make it sound like I was an alcoholic, but that's the way of life. It was interesting. I think some of the things that I learned about were a little bit more about my mom, because I
Mhm.
understood my mom a little bit more, being immersed in that culture, right?
Right.
But it's interesting because you talk about travel. So from that point, from London, as
Yeah.
opposed to living in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in the middle
Yeah.
of Canada,
Yeah.
right? For living in London, England, it was a lot easier to actually travel.
Yeah.
So, you can just like skip across to Amsterdam in an hour,
Right.
or
True.
Belgium or somewhere like that. And so I did a lot of traveling. And even after I left England, before I moved back to Canada, I did a lot of traveling, because I tell people, next to my children, I've learned the most from traveling, because I think it's interesting for us to actually experience other culture. I just think it's so important. So yeah, I backpacked a little bit and did a
Yeah.
little bit of traveling, and then kind of came home. But yeah, I don't know if obviously living on my own, but that was kind of, it wasn't a shock, because I was already living in a house and doing everything in a house. So at the age of 17, 18, I was almost,
Right.
that independent person already living on my own, but not really, right? Because
Yeah.
my dad was still there, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, so it was just like, for added further on to the experience that had already started, or my
Yeah.
journey that already started when I was like 17, 18. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And either way, I do believe that, just again, as you mentioned, just being able to learn a lot about different cultures is huge. And that helps us in some shape or form down the line in things that we're doing in our lives. And so you came back to Canada, and did you say, okay, well, I'm coming back home. I already have a job or a profession lined up that I want to do, or how did that kind of worked out?
No, that's far too easy for me. So what I did was
Yeah.
so what I did was I moved to Montreal. My sister had moved to Montreal, and I went, "Hey, I'm going to come live in Montreal." So I moved to Montreal, and I went to university, and I got my university degree. So I got a degree in social science and psychology.
Ah,
And
okay.
my sister, after that, my sister moved shortly after that and moved out west. But yeah, and then learned French.
Ah,
So,
okay.
yeah, so I was like 28. I went back to university when I was 28, because it's interesting. My parents, my husband and I were just having this conversation the other day. We were talking about higher education, and
Yeah.
how with our kids, some people really push their children to, as soon as they finish high school, to move on and get into higher education. But I knew at the age of 18 that I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew that I needed to do something different, right?
Hmm.
And but it's like, I just felt like I needed to do something different, and going to school, even though I didn't really like school. So I thought, there's no point in me going further on. But my parents also would not ever have encouraged that, because that's just not something that they were, right? So that wasn't something that my parents back in, like, in the 50s would have done when they were living in England, right? Or even
Hmm.
my dad, who was from Northern Ireland, right? I mean, that wasn't just the way it was. In fact, I remember my dad telling me that he never had an opportunity to get a higher education. And he was right, because that's, he was one of a gazillion children, and they were poor and right. So my dad was much more self-educated than anything. But yeah, my parents would never have said, "Oh, now you've got to go to university." They just was like,
Right.
"Oh, you finished school, you should probably get a job." And so I did, and then left, right? So
Right.
yeah, I moved back to Canada, and I got my degree. And during that period of time, I got pregnant.
Mm.
And I decided that, yeah, that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to have this child I was carrying. And my partner at the time, when I was 7 months pregnant, told me that he couldn't deal.
Wow.
And I just said, "See ya."
Yeah.
So I became a single mom very quickly. So my son was born the following year, and just before I turned 30, or no, just before I turned 31. And yeah, and I raised him for the first 5 years on my own. I finished my degree because I knew that if I stopped, that I wouldn't go back. So I just went part-time. So I finished my degree part-time. So yeah.
Got it. No, that's amazing. Looking back now and seeing, seeing it from your son's perspective, the fact that he kind of grew up without a father the first 5 years per se, you know, how difficult did that make it for you and for him to be able to do that? Because, for those that might be single moms that are listening to the show right now, definitely sometimes that's the biggest challenge, is like, how did I do it? How did I make it? How did I go to that next level? How can I contribute and continue to provide for my son, and or being able to help him understand that, hey, it's just the two of us per se.
Well, it's interesting. The one thing that I had were a lot of really strong women around me, so I think that kind of filled in the gap. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, you don't have time to think about the fact that there's not a dad in your life, because
Yeah.
it was my mother, my sister, and some of my closest friends are very strong women. So I think that I just looked at every day. It was just this is today. And this is what I'm doing today. And if I have a bad day, or we have a bad day, or something's not driving, then that's okay, because tomorrow's another day, right? What do they say? Every new sunrise is an opportunity to make good with yourself and the creator, right, and your fellow
Hmm.
man, right? And I really do believe that. And I think that is exactly how I try to live my life every day, like that, right? Because I can't, this is a situation. I can't think about how I would like the situation to be like this,
Right.
right? So my life completely changed, and my focus came, especially once I got my degree. So I had that part-time thing going on with the degree, and everything else was just fully based around my son and what was best for him, because that's what I had to do, right?
Yeah. So I like what you mentioned, and pretty much like you said, you got to be able to understand and just accept. You just accept that this is the current situation, and you cannot make it any better or any different.
Yeah.
It is what it is, and so you got to make the best out of that. The second thing you mentioned is that you had a good group of women around you, so your support system. And I think that's pretty critical when it comes down to not just family and anything to that nature. It could be really in anything, in business, even in business. Having a good support system that can help you really go to that next level, or help you continue to move forward, is huge. And sometimes we tend to overtake that for granted and not see it from that perspective, right? So no, that's good. I want to fast forward a little bit, and I know that one of the biggest challenges you had to deal with, through your life, and one of the biggest obstacles was the your son, being adult, had an addiction to substance. How did that happen? How did that make an impact on you? And why was that your biggest challenge, and what you do about it?
Well, it's interesting. Uh, so his addiction was to cocaine.
Hmm.
His addiction was going on way before I actually knew that it was.
Mm.
Though at some point I knew something was going on. I wasn't really sure, and he was still living at home. But I believe he had moved out of the house when he was, I think it's when he was 17, and I'm gonna make an assumption that's when it actually started, because I wasn't around. I wouldn't
Right.
actually know that he moved out of the house. I always knew where he was. And then he came back when he was 18. And he was not And so throughout that time, he was not a daily cocaine user. I would say he was a functioning cocaine
Mm,
addict. And when I say that, what I mean is he would use cocaine. He would go to work and, use cocaine, go to work kind of thing. And, and then of course he would be using cocaine and, would be acting really weird and nobody could figure out what was going on because this was
right.
just so foreign to me, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, and I think that I, kind of had an inkling one day. I had said something to him, and he was very aggressive. Like his behavior was very aggressive. I remember telling a friend of mine this, and I was kind of scratching my head and trying to figure it out. And then in 2014, he sat down one day, or he came downstairs, and he said to me, I was just getting ready to go and take my dogs out for a walk, and he said to me, "Oh, you're going out to walk the dogs?" I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I need to talk to you about something." And as soon as he said that, I knew it wasn't just like, "Oh, do you
Something.
think I could
Yeah.
borrow $40?" I knew it wasn't. Like I could feel the energy of what he was going
Right.
to. If there was something really heavy he was going to tell me. So I went out and walked the dogs around the block. I just did a walk around the block, and I came home, and he sat at the table across from me, and he was looking down, and his leg was shaking like up and down. He was like, kind of like the sewing machine
Yeah.
leg kind of thing. Like he was purposely doing that because he was very nervous. And then he just said, "I'm addicted to cocaine."
Mm,
And I just remember that feeling of just my heart dropping and just thinking, "Oh my God." And so I didn't really know what to do. Like and the first thing that set in, it's interesting because I was thinking about this as I would
yeah.
this week, anticipation of this. I think one of the first things I felt was embarrassment.
Mm,
And that in itself is interesting, and I'll come back and
yeah.
address that because but I felt embarrassment, and I just said to him, like, do you need help? Like, do you want, are you looking for help from us? And I would ask him, these kind of questions, and he just said, yeah, he needs help. He can't, he just can't do this on his own. He just can't kick this habit.
Hmm.
And so I said, okay, fine. And, his girlfriend at the time, who's actually now his wife, had basically, has been, had stuck with him the whole time. Like, God love her.
Hmm.
And then, I just started looking around at things that I could do to help him. And I started going online, and that night, when my husband came home, so I guess, my younger kids were at activities and doing with
Hmm.
their stuff. And my husband came home. It was just the two of us having dinner. And I said to him, so I just said to him, I said, "So Marley sat down with me today and said, I'm addicted to cocaine." And my husband's response was, "Oh, great." But it's interest that response was actually interpreted completely differently from me. Like
Hmm.
hearing that, because he was already going through my husband was already going through his own things because it
Hmm.
was because of his job and work and everything else. And so I, at that point, felt really unsupported because I
Right.
didn't even know what to do. And I thought, oh, great. So I can't, but the reality is he could support me. How can he support me? He's now going, "Oh, great. Oh my God." And
Yeah.
I'm going, "Oh
Right.
my God."
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's it's really hard when couples go through something like this, because it is sometimes really hard to support each other when neither of you can support yourself, right? And
Right.
so what I did after I got out of that embarrassment, I started calling a couple of my friends, and got some really interesting feedback from them. One of my friends actually said to me, "I tried cocaine once." She says, she said to me, "I tried cocaine once." She goes, "And I realized I can never do that again."
Mm,
And so that made me feel a little bit better because it was alluding to the fact of the addictiveness of cocaine, right?
yeah.
And so, I did a lot of research. I thought about all the different things that I could do. And then it was a process, right? It's not like, "Oh, okay, we're going to get you help." And like next month he was fine. It wasn't that at all. Like it was
Right.
like years of that. I'm not, and the reality is you can't ever really force anybody to do anything. And each time he would use, it was just it was just it was so heavy in the house. Everybody in the house was affected by it.
Hmm.
You can't not be affected by that. Every single person in the house is affected by it in some way. And yeah, so that how that's unfolded. And then the way and the challenging part, like I said, is that that's not something you sit down and talk to people over coffee, because it's just
Right.
it's
Yeah.
just it's so heart-wrenching, because you can't, what can they say? right?
Yeah.
Like if somebody says that to me, I could obviously say something in response or not say something in response
Right.
and kind of guide them along the way. But if you have no experience with it, and nobody I knew had any experience with that, and then I spoke to somebody who was actually quite a heavy cocaine addict, and then I said, well, I think he's just doing it recreationally, and she said, really, nobody does cocaine recreationally. And
Mm,
I was like, what? And she said, yeah. And she said, it is what it is.
yeah.
And so, yeah, so then it was just a process of, trial and error. Like, and I know that sounds awful, but that's the reality of it. And the reality of, because of the drug and what it can actually do to your body, the reality of this could end not the way I want it to,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is in him dying. And it did not, I would like to
Yeah.
say it did not,
That's
right?
good. Yeah. Now, did you obviously you feel shame? You feel like you were shocked, obviously, with that. At any given point, did you come to think about like I failed my son, or you blamed yourself for his actions? Because sometimes, I mean, that could take place, right? Was that even anything that kind of crossed your mind, or you just kind of like,
Well, it's interesting. When my son was, before I met my husband, I used to smoke. I smoked cigarettes, and I smoked cigarettes for like from the time I was 14 until I was like whatever. I smoked for 22 years,
yeah,
36, I guess. And my husband, my son and I were walking in the park one day, and he said to me, "You know what, Mom?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "You're teaching me how to smoke." And I went, "Holy
oh,
crap!" I went, "Holy crap!"
yeah,
He was like, he's a very old soul, and I
yeah,
was like, oh, and I tell you, I swear to God, within a week and a half I quit smoking,
yeah, yeah,
and I have not smoked a cigarette since. Right? So it's really interesting. So I understand addiction. Like I get addiction
right,
because I was addicted to cigarettes, and
yeah,
they say being addicted to cigarettes is as bad as heroin,
yeah,
right?
of course, yeah,
So I don't, part of me, because I knew that I did that, and because I knew that I personally was not in, I was not in that, I was not personally using cocaine. I mean, probably the only thing that I've ever done and ever do is smoke marijuana.
hmm,
And so for me it was, I didn't actually blame myself on that level, but I had a feeling there was probably something to the fact that his father was not around, like his
right,
biological father,
yeah,
and he only met him once, or
mm,
sorry, twice. He met him. He asked me when he was 4 about him. I arranged that meeting, and then he met him one other time, and he made a decision that he did not like him.
uh,
And my family were told never to badmouth him, but those are his
right,
things to work through, right? Like I can't be responsible for. I do not feel that we're responsible for everybody's behavior, sorry, everybody's relationships, right? I'm only responsible for my relationship with my husband, with each one of my children, or any other person in that matter, right? I'm not responsible for their relationship with somebody else.
got it,
Right.
yeah, that
And
makes sense,
so I was really firm about that. So I think that may have contributed to it in some way, for
for
sure.
sure,
Like I
yeah,
don't know, because I'm not him.
right,
But
yeah,
the reality of it is, and so when so I started studying color, because this is actually really relevant
yeah,
to this, my own personal journey. So when I started studying color, so color psychology is what it is, or color therapy, or whatever you want to call it,
hmm,
is really is color is using color as a determinant of behavior, and it mirrors back to you exactly. It sits in our subconscious mind. We understand color really on a really deep level, right? And I was just veering off the path, but it is very, very
hmm,
pertinent to this whole journey that I went on. So color is a determinant of behavior, and we understand color on a really deep subconscious level, and it's evidenced by things like how we use it nonsensically in our language. Tickled pink, yellow bellied, green with envy, so angry I saw red, I'm feeling blue.
mm,
And none of these make sense on a conscious level. But they really and truly do make sense on a subconscious level. Like we really understand them. And so because of that, when we work with color, it helps us to connect to what's sitting in our subconscious. And when we connect to what's sitting in our subconscious, it allows us to actually bring it to the surface, look at it, and release it. So around addiction, on as sitting here as a mother of
hmm,
an adult who had an addiction, the number one thing that I had to clear was judgment.
mm,
right? So, and then the judgment is around the use. The judgment is around the actual drug. The judgment is around myself and my own response to him using. My judgment is around the dealers. My judgment is around. So, you know, it's all this judgment. And so I was very aware of that, because one day I was actually, because sometimes when we wear clothes, it is in direct relation to how we're actually feeling. That's why some days you put on a shirt and you go, yeah, I'm rocking this, and a week later you go, you know, I mean, it happens, right? And so that is probably the color is not actually in line with how we're actually feeling at that time. What I noticed was the two colors that I was actually wearing. I was like, oh, this is really weird. What do these two colors mean together? And I went in and looked, you know, started looking and doing my own personal research on in my own books and stuff, and realized that actually the colors that I was wearing were directly related to judgment. And I went, oh,
Wow.
look at that. So I had to really look at that. I had to stop judging. I had to understand this had nothing to do with me, because this has nothing to do with me. This is his decision, right? Like it really doesn't have anything to do with me on that level, like the actual addiction itself. The judgments are mine. And I stand very firm when I say this: we attract what we judge. So if I'm judging something, right, because the universe will just then go out and prove us how right we are, right? And so if I'm judging cocaine as a really awful thing that's on the planet, but you know, if you want to go on the other side of that, you know, it has its purpose. It was used as a pain reliever, right? So it you know, its main purpose was that, and it's just, this is how people are using it, and recreationally, and it's not such a great thing to do, right? So I had to, you know, and you know, not that I'm a very spiritual person. So I go, well, if everything comes from God or a spirit or source, then it's there for whatever purpose it's there for. And you know, and also my own purpose is it's something that I'm experiencing on my own journey. And it's helping me look at judgment. So you know, I'm so aware of judgment. Like, I'm so aware when I judge something. I'm driving. Oh yeah, well, I judge that, right?
Yeah, right.
So you know, it's really important that we are aware of the fact that we go into judgment so often, right?
Yeah.
So color really helped me do that. So it will help me. It helped me go through that whole experience, and for me to actually understand as well that I am not the reason. I am not. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. He's on it. He's on this journey, and it's not an easy one. And let me help him any way that I actually can. Now, and the beginning of the ending of this was an interesting process for him, and that was I had taken him down to upstate New York to actually go do a sweat lodge with some of the indigenous people that I know in upstate New York. And so we did a sweat lodge, and he loved that experience. And we left there and came home from that weekend. And the following Friday, he used again, and I was just stunned. And I was just like, what? Like, how is that possible? This is stepping backwards. It's stepping backwards. But it actually wasn't, because what eventually happened was his then girlfriend, now wife, was actually living in our house. And her and I just, you know, she just said, like, I'm done. I'm moving out. So she moved out. She put some conditions on. So it kind of brought everybody to a different level. And it made him make some serious decisions. So it was the perfect thing that happened, right? So I kind of went, oh, okay, the sweat lodge really worked, right? Because it is, right? Because the reality is that was the beginning of him making a step. And it's almost like he had to use one more time in order for that to happen, right?
Right. Yeah.
So then, you know, he went to NA, and he did that for a while, and I think that was a really good step for him. I think the problem for him was that he said, when he decided to stop going to NA, because he had relapsed twice, he said to me, the problem for me with NA, Mom, is that NA is full of a bunch of drug addicts. And I went, oh. And he said, and when there's drug addicts, there's drama, and when there's drama, there's use. And he said, and I need to stay away from that. And so he started to understand, getting very clear on what he needed. And you know, and sometimes, you know, and I think NA and I think AA, and I think they're really great programs, and they really help a lot of people. You know, I struggle a little bit with having to say, You know, him having to say that I'm a drug addict, I'm always going to be a drug addict. I don't know. I don't know how forward moving that is. So I struggle a little bit with that, but like just for today, like that whole just for today that they do in AA and NA is really beautiful. And I think it's really very helpful for people.
Yeah.
So he slipped out. He, you know, stepped out of NA and decided that that was just really what he needed to do. And now he needed to try and do something on his own. And, you know, I would work with him with color, and I worked on myself with color, because the reality is mothers and children are very connected.
Yeah.
And, you know, I believe that, you know, when people talk about things that are hereditary, I think that sometimes, you know, emotion actually comes through in our DNA. I think that in uterine, he probably also experienced a lot of things that I was going through, because his biological father left when I was 7 months pregnant,
Yeah.
you know, abandonment, anger, like all of those things. I believe that we actually also pass on to those babies. We also pass on to them, you know, because communication is all energy and nonverbal when they're young as well, right?
Yeah.
So I think that is some of that. So I cleared myself, and that's what it was really about. It was really about me clearing myself. And then eventually he one day he used, and he sent me a text the next day when he was on his way to work, and said, "This is effing ridiculous," all in capital letters. And he said, "For 12 hours for what?" And as soon as he said that, I knew it was done, because I could energetically feel him. Like he would walk in the house, I would have my back to the door, and I would know that he used. I could tell just by his energy. I didn't even have to look at him.
Yeah.
So you know, I think that, but in that text, I knew, and that was that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great, and I do believe, kind of going back to what you just mentioned, I do believe some of these programs can definitely help you, and you know, there's some good principles. I also believe now, at least now, if you would ask me this 5-6 years ago, my mentality would be different. I do believe that the words you use do matter, right? And I do believe a lot in affirmation. So when I'm here and I walk in and I say I am an alcoholic, I'm affirming that, and so I'm not trying to be that, and I don't want to be that, and so unconsciously I'm telling myself I am, and so to me, it matters, and so if I want to make a change, I'm gonna stop saying that. It's like the same thing in saying, I'm broke, I'm poor, I don't have money, or I don't have a job, or I don't have anything. Yeah, I may not have a job, except I don't want to focus on that, because what you focus will expand. Right.
Exactly.
And so I do believe that certain things need to be changed. The other thing that kind of talking about being able to find your path, and the fact that you found your path with colors, and some of the things that maybe your son was going through. I'm also an NLP certified, so I do believe that a lot of things that happen between the ages of 0 and 7 do go with us, and that energy and the things that are acclimated with what's going on during that time frame can definitely show up to you at a different time in your life, even if you don't realize that. And unless you're working through those things through some sort of therapy, whether it's color therapy, whether it's NLP, whether it's any kind of therapy, they're gonna keep showing up, and you gotta be able to, as you mentioned, clear those things and gonna kind of get them. So I'm definitely interested to learn more about this. And you said color can be used as a determinant or behavior, and connecting to color can help us remove blocks created by thoughts, beliefs, and patterns, right? Tell me more about that. Like, how those I guess, color therapy, what is kind of like a usual therapy? How does that work? How do you identify? Because there's so many different colors.
Yeah. So behind me, this is the system I use. This system's been around for 21 years. It was developed by a woman by the name of Melissa Jolie in South Africa. There's another color system called Orasoma. This has got a very feminine energy to it with round bottles. So they're dual colored bottles of oil and water. That's how they separate. I don't know if you can see them in the background.
Yep.
Let me pull up. This is one of my favorite bottles. So that'll give you an idea of what they kind of look like, right? And each color and each color combination has its own meaning that the subconscious mind actually understands. And so let's say someone was coming for color therapy. I do a lot of other things. I do sound therapy and relaxation, and I always try to get people into a relaxed state before I actually work with them. That's my MO. And because I feel like when we're relaxed, we're much more open. And so, say for example, someone will come in, I'll have them choose like 5 colored bottles. I have with intention. So is there something that on your mind or not on your mind or whatever? Color never lies. People I don't know if I can swear, but I'm going to swear.
Yeah.
Sorry. So people say, like we used to laugh. Someone said to me once, because I used to say to, they'd say stuff to them. I go, I can't even make this shit up. And they would say, you should have that in your business cards. And I said, yeah, I know, right?
Yeah.
So people pick bottles based on whatever it is that they're going through, whatever their higher self needs to know, whatever, like if they really want to get stuck or they're in a situation. And so then they'll be picking 5 bottles. I have them relax. I come back and then we sit down and look at the colors.
So let me ask you this. Yeah. So let's say, obviously, I don't, not knowing the how to interpret the different colors, what they mean. Do they just pick based on what, in their mind, whatever they say, I like that color, or do you like them, or whatever they,
right. Okay. So they're going with intention. So let's say, for example, I'm just trying to think of, I'm really struggling to try and, secure a healthy relationship with a significant other. I really want to look at what that's at. Let's say, for example, that's what they're coming for. And so they'll come and they pick 5 bottles, and then we look at the bottles, and we look at the story that the bottles are telling them. So each of these bottles, so these are all on my website as well. Yeah. So, and you, at any given day, if you go, you're angry at something, you go, I need to clear my anger, you can go on my website, look at the bottles, pick one, look at them, pick them. Yeah. And that bottle will tell you, it has a beautiful little write-up on it, and it'll basically help you clear. Again, like wearing colors will as well, and yeah, connecting to colors, right? So for example, let's say they're and quite often people are just really not loving themselves enough, right? Well, they're not, really. So it's sometimes the bottles will pull that out and say that, or maybe there's a block that they've got. They think that, a male or female, they think the opposite sex or the same sex or whatever it is they're trying to attract will, or they're all assholes, or, they may have those thoughts right in their mind, or they, because was it Joe Dispenza talks about how repetitive patterns happen because it's actually chemically it happens within our brains, right? Like we're used to those actual reactions that happen when we're in a relationship. So we're used to, people continually get involved in, say, abusive relationships because that's what they know. Right. And so color will help us release those things from wherever they came, whether they're within our DNA or whether they've come from past experiences. Right. But that's what we do. So it actually highlights them. And so it comes up and puts it like right in your face to say, this is what this is. Mm-hmm. And so not only does it say this is what this is, it also helps them to just let it go. It's so profound and just so subtle, so gentle, and so beautiful. Like I just can't. And people usually, I've never heard anybody say, yeah, I'm back to where I was, because it's just such forward moving, such a forward moving session that they will have. Right. Yeah. It just really is so lovely. This system has changed my life. I will tell you, I studied it and had no idea what this was actually going to do. Wow. And just, yeah. So it leaves me in this space where I feel that I can actually go and see myself when I'm judging immediately. Yeah. Bam, judging that. I got to stop that. Right.
Yeah. Now, do you, I'm assuming each session it might be different by person, or is it normally around this, any given time frame, or it really depends on what people have in their mind or what they're trying to clear, or?
Oh, absolutely. Like, right. So, like I can do this virtually as well. Right. So, it's the same thing. You would pick the bottles. We would be sitting here on a call and you would be picking bottles, and, we would be talking about the bottles. Right. And I always tell people, like, it's not guessing, and it's not tarot. It's like, if you say to me, look, I'm here because I can't move forward in my business. And I say, okay, well, let's have a look at that. And then you pull the bottles, whatever the reasons are, you're going to be pulling the bottles. It has nothing. And in fact, people will say, oh, do I just pick the bottles I like? I go, well, it's whatever you're drawn to. So let's say there's a bottle that you cannot stop looking at, and you do not like the bottle, you should probably pick that bottle, right? And then so they'll pick the bottles, right? And then the story unfolds, because every single person is different, their experiences are different, right? And that's why every single reading will also be different based on whatever because as you're clearing, you're moving forward. So if I have a client that's going to come and see me, like 3 months in a row, by the time they usually get to the 3rd month, they're kind of just doing it for fun, right? It's like, oh, this is so much fun, I'm going to clear it, because you don't feel heavy. Like, or even when I do readings, sometimes people just start crying. They go, oh my God, I don't even know why I'm crying. And I go, well, it's a release, right? It's like you're releasing whatever you need to release. So it is a personalized and everybody's colors will be different, though I do tend to have people, I have clients where I'll have a week where like a client will, each of the clients, they'll all pick one of the same bottle. I go, oh, so clearly that's what we're clearing this week, right?
Yeah, right.
I always look at that as being something that to clear for the collective as well, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then do you combine that? So then you combine that with sound therapy or
Well,
all
I
the
do.
time? Or?
Yeah, well, if I've never done that virtually, to be honest, but yeah, so I work quite extensively with Tibetan singing bowls, so the metal bowls,
Yep.
and other things that are fun if people are open to it, because sound is sound, right?
Right.
Rain sticks and all the rest of it. But
yeah.
So when I'm working with people, I will actually put them into a nice relaxed state with singing bowls, because the reality about singing bowls is that they will connect to your theta, alpha, and beta brain waves, right?
Yeah.
And they will put you into a relaxed state. They're not asking your permission. You're just going there. Somebody told me they saw their to-do list bowing down when they were on the table, right? But so in person I'll always do a relaxation session, and then colored combined, and then virtually I usually just do color, which is powerful in itself, right?
Right. Yeah. No, definitely. And I like it because I done sound therapy. I actually did one not too long ago, and I just like the fact that you can connect with the different chakras, and just the different sounds can definitely have a different purpose, and I enjoy a lot of that. Anything that has to do with just sound therapy, NLP, or any of that stuff. I mean, just because it definitely helps you clear a lot of different things. So I do believe in all those things. And so definitely something people got to try. One thing that you mentioned here, and I want you to kind of expand a little bit more on that, is you talked about and said that that life, is perfect, right? And so elaborate more on that, right? Because many people say, well, man, I'm going through a lot of shit right now. Like, this doesn't seem to be perfect to me, right? Nevertheless, what do you mean by that? Yeah.
Well, yeah. So, and you know what? And I will tell you that I do actually really do live that. And that means that I had to look personally at my own stuff, and to say, okay, well, how is my son's drug addiction, perfect? The second most important tragic thing that actually happened in my life is that my sister passed away in 2011 from ovarian cancer from the age of 52. My sister and I were very, very close. And that was devastating. That was so devastating to me. I went, oh, and this is one of the principles of this system, is that life is perfect, right? And it's like, okay, well, how can I sit and work with clients if I go, life is perfect, except my sister dying, that wasn't perfect.
Right.
And so I had to actually delve into that to say, how is this perfect? How was that perfect in my life? So I had to look at that, and I made some very, very interesting decisions about it. And so first and foremost, the reason why my sister's passing was perfect is because if my sister had not passed, I would still be working at the bank. And that is not my life purpose. My life purpose is not to be working at a bank doing stock and bond settlements. And I did that for a very long time. And it served me very well. And I have no regrets about doing anything in my life. But it is, I had to make that decision that is where I find it. I learned so much from that experience of my sister dying. I actually wrote a book on grief.
Oh, okay.
That all had to do with my sister, not just my sister's passing, but it incorporates color and everything else. But it was, if that had not happened, that book would never have come, because I understand the depths of grief. Yeah. And I'm a grief specialist. So I understand the depths of grief. So again, if my sister had not passed, I would never have gone there. Just like my son's addiction, the things that I learned about myself through that whole process. Right. It is because I believe that our journey is really about us and what we're doing here. I believe that we are divine beings having human experiences. And all the experiences that we have are here to aid us along whatever it is that we are going to actually learn in this life. And sometimes we find that very difficult to look at, right? The likes of Ho'oponopono, right? Which is system is very, very mirrors a lot. Ho'oponopono says that, the problems arrive in our lives because we draw them in. It's not like we're drawing them in because, some of it is judgment, right? We judge and then we draw whatever in, like, all men are assholes. I draw in all men are assholes, right? If I decide that they're not all assholes, we'll probably find the person I'm looking for, right? like, it's like, that's a really simplistic way to look at it. But yeah, so I don't know if what I've just said explains that to you,
Yeah,
but I
no,
mean, that's
definitely.
what I believe. I believe that we are in charge. We are in charge of our reality, and life is perfect because that's what we've decided that we're going to bring in. So
Yeah.
change your thoughts. I mean, so many people say it. I mean, the law of attraction says that change your thoughts. There's so many people that actually say that, but that's the reality of it. Life really is perfect because we are creating it. And if you don't feel like it is perfect, then we need to change our thoughts and create a different thought pattern, right?
Right. Yeah, and two things that you mentioned that kind of stuck out for me. Number one is we're always on this discovery phase. We're going through life and just discovering life, right? I mean, there's different things, it's just we're in this place, and every day is a new discovery. Something new is gonna happen, and so you're kind of looking, searching, and finding things which definitely can serve you. The second thing that I kind of took away from that is that I always tell people that sometimes from a pain point, a purpose is born, right? And you kind of mentioned that and alluded to that if it wasn't for this, you would have never found this. If it wasn't for that, and even though that was painful, you found a purpose, you found something in life. And so I believe that from that perspective, there's always going to be something. We got to be able to look at life and see, even in my darkest moment, or my moment of grief, or whatever that might be, there's got to be something good that's going to come out of this. And when we can realize that and we can look at it from that perspective, and as you mentioned, change your thoughts and change the way you see things, then things are going to start changing for the better. And so
Absolutely.
I definitely agree that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't. This bottle here is the darkest bottle in the system in the system that I work with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the actual bottle itself is called illumination, right?
Ah,
And so I always say to people, and actually it looks black, but it's
yeah.
actually deep, deep, deep magenta on both top and bottom. And magenta is the color of divinity, and so it is about that, right? Like, in a completely black room, you can see a pinhole of light,
Mm-hmm.
right? And we have to remember that there is always a pinhole of light somewhere. Like, somewhere
Right.
we will find it, right? And it doesn't mean that, just because I've cleared everything today, next year I'm going to be great, and the rest of my life I'm going to be great. I don't believe that at all.
Right.
I believe that I'm just every step that I come across, I'm going to learn something more, right? And if I spiral down, I'm going to spiral down, and I'm going to learn something from that experience, and I'm going to come back up, right?
Yeah, and again, it's a discovery phase. There's always gonna be something new, something different. So you deal with what emerges, and you start discovering yourself in that sense. If people wanted to connect with you, where can they find you?
Probably the best way is through my website,
Okay.
susanmckenzie.co. That's MCK, not MAC, but
Yeah.
susanmckenzie.co. But yeah, that's probably the best place. They can contact me through there. They can have a look at the bottles, which are always fun.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's also sprays to the system as well, colored sprays. And they're at
Ah,
a little bit a lighter level. Sometimes so they also all have write-ups, and they smell beautiful. These actually, people bathe in these if they want to really, like,
mm.
if they feel like they're
And
really
so
going through
big fan
something
too.
deep.
Yeah.
They can bathe in these bottles, or yeah. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
a lot of fun.
Yeah. And so you work with people pretty much, like you say, you can do some of this. You can do this virtually, obviously,
Yeah,
and so you can work with anybody really. Whoever's listening, they can work with you.
absolutely.
Good. And in terms of you like doing this, and you do the sound therapy, are there any other new things you're working on that you want to incorporate into your therapy?
I don't know if I am or not. I think that like, I teach the system.
Okay.
I see clients. I see clients. I love to write. And
Mhm.
I started writing children's books because they're
Oh,
just fun
cool.
to write. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's kind of fun. I've written my whole entire life. I used to have pen pals when I was a kid and stuff,
Yeah.
but I don't know if there's anything else that I feel like I want to bring on. I am actually looking at Dinshaw's color therapy, where they actually use therapy to help with physical ailments, like actually
Mhm.
like colored light.
Yeah.
That would probably be the only place that I would go, but I don't think I'm actually going to delve outside of any of the parameters. I said I'm 61.
Yeah.
I'm being on.
Now you're still good. So Susan, you've given us a lot of great tips. So I want to see if I can get one more from you for the people that are listening to us and they're watching us. if they're going through any challenge, whatever challenge that might be, what is one thing you can say that they can start overcoming that challenge?
I would look at it as a learning experience, right? And you know, I know I was saying I love to write. I think that sometimes journaling is a really good thing to do, and sometimes it's good for us to actually journal and get things out, and
Mm,
then to start looking rather at how awful it is, to actually look on the opposite of that, and to look at what it is that we want, right? Where we want to go. So if you know, if it is, you know, I'll go back to the relationship thing just because it's easy.
mhm.
If you're not in that relationship that you want to be in, then focus in on what that relationship looks like, and then focus on the next thing, right?
Right.
Because if you keep harping on about the exact same thing over and over and over again, that's not going to help either, right?
Yeah.
So so
Yeah.
I that's what I believe. I think it really is. I think journaling, I feel like really understanding what it is, like really getting to the core of what it is, because it's not just, you know, you want a relationship just because, you know, you just want a relationship. It's like, you know, why do you want a relationship? You really got to delve a little bit into that, right?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And then my last question for you is, do you have any daily, Tony Robbins calls them rituals. Do you have any habits, any things that you do on a day-to-day basis to kind of keep you in a positive state of mind or just help you, be at ease with yourself every day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Other than drinking tea, which I think everybody should do. That's my English background.
Okay.
I get up anywhere between 5 and 5:30, including on these dark mornings that we're having now. I
Yeah.
get up, I walk my dogs, and I come home and I meditate. And I really miss when I don't meditate.
Okay.
And sometimes I don't even get into that headspace of meditating, but I think meditating is, yeah. And again, like, it's not, you know, I think everybody should meditate. I just think it's just, even if we
Mhm.
feel like we can't, even just taking that time to
Yeah.
just be, is, I think it's really soul nourishing.
Yeah. How critical is it for people that want to make a change in life to have some sort of habits, whatever that might be. It doesn't matter how big or how small, to have daily habits. Because I know if I look at my old self, I mean, I didn't have any habits, and sometimes I wouldn't want to get up, or I wouldn't want to do anything, or I would want to come home from work and sit on the couch, or just really didn't have any, maybe I might have had per se a okay life and whatever that might have been, except I didn't think have any kind of habits or discipline or things to nature. So how critical is that for your well-being and in your future?
Well, you know, it's interesting because my husband and I really did our life backwards, right? Because
Hmm.
when he met me, we had kids. My husband's younger than I am. He's 11 years younger than I am, and so when we met, I already had my son, and then we had it, and then we also then had two children, and it's interesting because you know, we were on that wheel, right? Because, you know, we both worked in office jobs, and, you know, it's like, you know, you get up and then he drops the kids off, and then, you know, I come home and I pick the kids up, and it's dinner and then activities and homework. And, you know, so we kind of laughed because my youngest daughter is 19. And so when she turned 18, it was like, wow, this is the first time that we've been married that we don't have anyone to be responsible for.
Yeah.
And it really is really difficult. And I wish that I could have really gone into that space of making something that was just important. But I realized afterwards that I did have one thing that I did. And I think that we all need to have one thing that we do just for ourselves on a daily basis, whatever that might be. And for me,
Mhm.
it was walking my dogs.
Yeah.
I would walk my dogs every day because it gave me that time to just be by myself and in alone in my thoughts. Because how can we, if everything is just going on and on and on in our minds and we can't clear our minds, how can we move forward if that's all we're thinking about is everything that's going on here, right? Because it's in our faces, right? So being, you know, taking some time to ourselves, that self-care, you know, is the buzzword right now, right? But I
Mhm.
think it really is important that we go into a space of self-care, because if we don't do that, then we're going to burn out.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that. I love that. Wow, Susan, I really enjoyed this conversation with you. Learned a lot of stuff about the color therapy and things like that. So definitely need to check out that website. Anything else you want to share before I let you go?
I don't think so. You know, like I said, I would just tell people to just be mindful of the colors that are around you now, right?
Yeah.
See
Yeah.
what colors are around you. Look at your home, look at what you wear, look, really just start being mindful about color.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you again for being here on the show. I really appreciate it having you on the show today, and definitely looking forward to learn more and seeing your journey. And for the rest of you guys, do me a favor, please make sure that you go ahead and check her out on her website. Go ahead and connect with her. And do me a favor, share this message because somebody definitely needs to hear this, and you don't know who can help be impacted by this message. I'll see you guys in the next episode of You Can Overcome Anything podcast show. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm CesarRespino, real estate investor, business coach, and consultant, and author of the book, You Can Overcome Anything, Even When the World Says No. My number is 424-501-6046. In my book, I talk about making the necessary changes to shift your mind for prosperity and certainty. Pick up your copy at Amazon. I also love helping families with their real estate and can purchase your house fast and all cash. Follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. My number is 424-501-6046.
Thank you for having me today. I am so glad you've tuned into this podcast. You can find me at your favorite podcast platform where you can like, subscribe, comment, and share. And to learn more about myself, my services, you can find me at www.CesarRespino.com, or you can also find me at your social media. Thanks for joining me, and I am looking forward to having you at the next episode. And know you truly can overcome anything.